Welcome to Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach with Mark Gellard and Candy Reid.
So welcome to everyone to Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. And for the first time ever, Mark Gellard, we're going to put this on YouTube, and that's thanks to your innovation.
I don't know if that's going to be a good thing for everyone seeing us up close. They had this picture of me being 6 foot and ripped.
And suave.
Yes, very suave. Well, I'm in Italy, so that's about as suave as I'm going to get.
You're in Rome, to be precise.
We're in Rome. We just got here maybe 3 days ago from Madrid. So we had a good week there, or I say a good week, an encouraging week, a positive week. Although it's, as a coach, you're never satisfied with the results. You always want more. But we've arrived in Rome. We've started our training here, preparing for the big tournament that starts here next week.
We've just got a guest on the podcast, just have to introduce him. This is Light the dog, who everybody can generally hear in the background on occasion. So he's part of my tribe. You had 1 win, 1 loss in Madrid. The loss was really, really tricky. And a lot of people actually got in touch with me, knowing we do this podcast, to say how unlucky Magda was.
Yeah, it was a tough turnaround from making the final in Rouen, which was an indoor clay event, flying over to Madrid within 24 hours of that final, and then having to play, going from indoor clay to outdoor clay, altitude instead of sea level. So there was a lot of changes, and the first round was very tough against Cocciaretto, a good Italian player that we'd lost to last time we played. So was really satisfied and really encouraged by the way we competed. I would say our competitiveness was probably better than our tennis level in that match. But that was what you want to see after you've got those difficult conditions and the adaptations that needed to take place. But the match with Sabalenka was really, I felt that we were probably, and I wouldn't say this too often, that we were probably the better player that day. And luck was definitely not on our side. And you need some luck sometimes, a couple of unfortunate timings with net cords, and Sabalenka came up with some big shots hitting the outside of lines, and you think, what if that was 2 millimeters the other way? It goes in our way, but that's why she's where she is. She seems to find the right side of the line more often than not. So
that's what the big players do. I think Madrid, for me, was very much about Rafa. Give us your thoughts on him being there and how chaotic it was. And I ask you that because, of course, I was in Barcelona, as we discussed on the last pod, and it was absolutely manic until he lost. Just the press, the media coverage, the people, the fans, even the players. We saw Pedro Cachin, didn't we, ask him at the end after losing to Rafa for a shirt because he was just his idol growing up. And for many, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, when he came there, he had his usual entourage, and he was in the restaurant playing his usual board games. I don't actually know which one it is. I'm not a board game fan, but
I think it's something like drafts, isn't it? Because they were playing it in Barcelona right before the matches to keep him calm.
He does a lot of that with his team, and I mean the whole hype and frenzy around every practice he had, and obviously being in Spain where he's from, so it's even bigger than normal. So it was great to see him, and I think we're gonna, certainly me and Magda were talking about it the other day, how much we're gonna miss seeing him around when he's gone, because you've taken it for granted for so long. What a great person he is, and a great player, obviously, but he's I don't know if anyone's ever going to eclipse what he's done in a lot of things.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to win 14 Roland Garroses. Not in our lifetime, I don't think, anyway. And the other big story I thought, Mark, was Danielle Collins. Came in, on a 13-match winning streak, won 13, 14, 15. I actually did her match when she played Jacqueline Christian, who I thought on the day would have probably beaten a lot of the field. Danielle Collins ended up winning in 3, but then Collins lost to Sabalenka. But her run is just extraordinary. And I don't know if you heard her heckling that fan when she was a set down and a game down. I think she took it out on somebody saying, you have no idea what I do. Have some respect.
That doesn't sound like something she'd do normally.
It's not Danielle Collins.
She's a really feisty competitor. I don't think she's as right as she always thinks she is, but she's a hell of a player, and the run that she's been on. And also, I've just talked about adapting from different surfaces. I mean, she went from winning Miami to literally a day or two later going out there and switching surfaces, completely different surface, to winning Charleston. And it's made things very interesting at the top of the game for the female US team, because the Olympics are coming up. And all of a sudden now you notice, for example, Emma Navarro is playing a 125 this week. I think there's some, I don't want to say panic is the right word, but there's a lot of vying for positions there, right? There's only four, maybe five players, four spots for the Olympics.
Yeah.
And Danielle Collins has now put herself in the picture. Obviously, you have Coco and Jessica Pegula and all of these other players that are already up there. So it's getting interesting. But what she's done the last month is really incredible. I don't think anyone saw it coming, probably least of all her.
You got Maddie Keys playing really well again now after just coming back from injury. I was interested in the doubles. Coco Gauff playing doubles with Taylor Townsend instead of Pegula. Do you know why Pegula didn't play doubles?
In Madrid? She didn't play Madrid, period. She was out with injury, so she's not played singles or doubles there.
That would be why. I didn't think I saw her name. That's my mistake. But I was just looking at the Taylor Townsend thing, thinking maybe they're teaming up for the Olympics. But I would imagine it would be Coco and JP.
Yes, I would expect them to continue their partnership because it always seems to yield pretty successful results. But yeah, Jessica's been out for an extra week or two, I think, just nursing a small irritation injury that she's had.
There we go. Yes, that's right. Because I think it was meant to be 19 of the world's top 20 playing Madrid, and then it was 18 because Pegula pulled out. So that's my mistake. I should have known better. I was just in the woods walking my dog, and I was thinking about the best coaches on tour, and I thought since we've got an interview with one of the best in any way, and I think in Craig Tyzzer now, I thought we'd talk about our best coaches after we run the interview. So Mark, this was an interview I actually conducted with him the year after Ash Barty won the Australian Open. So it was the summer down under anyway of 2023. And this is Craig Tyzzer talking all about his experience with Ash Barty, how Wimbledon unfolded when she won that, and also the Australian Open. You, I know, have heard this interview. Any thoughts?
Well, it's a really interesting interview. And when you get to hear from someone that's been a Grand Slam winning coach and has the experience behind them that he does, it's always fascinating to get a glimpse into what their thought process is. And I thought there were some interesting parts to his discussion with you, especially the difficulties the Australians have with travel. And then just listening to what he wants to do next. I think he was quite clear, or adamant, I should say, with you, that the travel part was not something he missed. But I think the tennis coaching at this level is a little bit like a drug addiction. And that you become addicted to the adrenaline that it gives you. It's a rush, the competitiveness, which I think that the club coaches maybe don't have in the same way that we do. And that's something that a lot of coaches from the tour struggle to then transition later on if they don't want to be on the tour anymore. It's very tough to go into a sort of, I don't want to say mundane, that's not the right word, but just that you don't have that adrenaline, that buzz of the match before and after. And you also don't have the downs. That's the other nice part. You know, when you go through periods like we've struggled the last couple of months, it hasn't been fun. There's a lot more bad days and good ones. So it's swings and roundabouts.
All right, so let's play the Craig Tyzzer interview, and then you and I will talk about our best 5 coaches. I've also got Ian Hughes's best 5 coaches as well on a little list. So let's hear from Craig now. Craig, you very kindly granted me an interview last year, and we spoke a lot about your success with Ash Barty, of course, now retired. I'd love to know how your life is now and what your plans are for the future.
Yeah, well, it's a lot quieter, especially travel-wise, and not as much on the road. But I've done a bit with Tennis Australia with some of the younger players and just mentoring not only the players but the coaches and trying to get them up to speed and to let them know what's ahead and try and give them lots of advice with how to go about it. So I've enjoyed that part of it. Done a bit with some of the younger girls in around the 14 age group as well. Just spend a bit of time with them technically and helping them with some of their. So I've enjoyed that sort of over the past 12 months, but I've got to make a decision on what the future looks like from here on in. Are
you mostly based in Brisbane?
No. I've been in Melbourne, but
okay.
I've actually travelled around Australia anyway, with most of the academies in each state and spend a bit of time with them as well. So.
After Ash retired, what I heard was you were going to work with her and Jason Stoltenberg and about really helping Australian tennis. Is that still the case?
Yeah, that was part of what we did this year or the last 12 months. So, I mean, it sort of put a dent in when Ash fell pregnant and had a baby, so she wasn't able to do as much. I mean, she did up until then, so but now she's a full-time mum. So Jason and I basically finished off what we'd set out to do in that 12 months, and yeah, both really enjoy it. Look, we're not sure. I mean, eventually I think we want to get our own facility, have our own base, and then, run our own programs out of it, but it's probably a bit further down the track.
How's the talent pool in Australia these days?
Really good in the younger age groups. We've got a lot, say, from the 11 to 14 who are tracking very well. Sort of that middle bit, we're a bit limited. We've got Emerson Jones, who's really tracking well at 15. We've got a few younger ones in the 14 age group who are coming along, but yeah, there's a big gap. I mean, we don't have any women in the top 100, so we've got a lot to work on, and we've got to produce pretty quickly. So
I coach some really good juniors, international standard, under 14 in Great Britain, and what I see, there's a theme where they have to have at least one parent that's very, very involved. Obviously, coaching, they have to have huge investment, and that generally also comes from the parent. Sometimes the parent, I think, goes overboard. Sometimes they're right on the periphery. Sometimes the child is driving it, and most times it's not. How do you see that?
Yeah, look, I think that's all pretty right. There's a lot more information, so there's a lot more parental involvement now and understanding of what they need to do. But there's also got to be, I guess, that trust in coaches and how that, and the relationship with players and coaches and how they see that. So, I mean, I've always believed that first of all, you have to understand the athlete, and then, I would put in everything I need to with that athlete to try and get them to the next level. So there has to be a certain amount of trust in that. But I understand the wariness with parents a bit as well. I'd hate to be a parent of a tennis player. I couldn't be involved. Yeah, so I think, it's a difficult scenario now, and it's also difficult to find the right fit for a lot of kids. And yeah, it's not an easy environment at the moment. I think some of the countries have got it right, and I think in Australia we haven't quite got it right yet, but we're trying to head in the right direction.
I was hearing a story about Zheng Qinwen, who's just reached her first major semi-final. We're talking at the moment at the Australian Open, and the story was there in China that she was actually delivered at 7 to an academy in Wuhan because she had some talent. And what she wasn't told was that her father wasn't taking her back home. She was staying at the academy. She was 7. And I've been hearing Anna Konyuk, the great Croatian who was number 1 in the world, was actually left home at 10 with her older sister who was 12. Can you even imagine that with your own kids?
No, I can't. I can't imagine. I mean, we're pretty lucky in Australia, and we have a pretty good lifestyle here, and education systems are great, but we also have great sporting opportunities for kids as well, so there's a lot more. But yeah, look, I know in China there's been a lot of that, in particular with sports and their arts and entertainment, so I'm not surprised by that. But I mean, she's got some potential. She turned out she's amazing tennis player. I actually had a good chat with Wim, who spent some time with her prior, and he was quite impressed with the way she goes about it and her attitude. So
yeah, of course, Wim Purcell now back with Naomi Osaka, but spent quite a long time, didn't he, with Zheng. Can you see, Craig, with all your experience, if you say get 5 kids come to you, can you almost spot the one that's probably got the best chance?
Well, look, it's probably easy to identify the kids that have got the most talent, but then also there's got to be the other aspects to it. So often those kids with the best talent need the kids who also work extremely hard around them, so that they understand what they have to do. Because it always frustrated me a bit with Ash that everyone saw how talented she was, but no one really understood how hard she actually worked, because your talent only takes you so far.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes an absolute slog, and you've really got to put in the yards and in every part of the game. And so I think it's sometimes hard to identify who's going to make it, because sometimes not the most talented are the ones who actually push themselves through because they work harder, they're more dedicated, and tennis can be a learnt skill as well, so that talent doesn't necessarily hold all the answers for everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do this podcast with Mark Gellard, who's the current coach of Magda, And this year in the Australian Open, she had an injury in the first round and had to pull out the doubles. She's due to play in Hua Hin in another week, so there was a 2-week gap in between. And now the question is, you've left the Australian Open, what on earth do you do if you live in Europe? How did you cope with all those challenges?
Yeah, that was quite difficult for us. I mean, out of Australia, trying to get back when you have breaks is not easy. We found a few places where in America we used to just train in Florida, do some training down there in our breaks. We actually got, I mean, some of the girls on tour are fantastic, like that through that year where we couldn't get back through quarantine. A lot of the girls offered and said, Petra Kvitova offered, a few of the girls said, you can come and stay with us and train, and so it was actually really nice to have those options. But yeah, it's difficult. I'm not completely unhappy that some of the Europeans are finding it difficult in Australia and then have to find somewhere to train, because we did it for so long and being away from home. So our last year was 8 months on the road. But yeah, it is difficult, and especially for someone like Ash, who's a homebody. She loved being at home when she could and wanted to spend time with family. So that can be really difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine.
From here to Thailand, it's not too far. There's plenty of people to hit with through the AO. You can spend a bit of time here and keep hitting. So,
and I suppose that's where it comes to being a good person, a nice person, that actually people want to accommodate you if there's something that you need to be accommodated by. Is that another life that you'd like to get back to, or are you not missing that travel part?
I certainly don't miss the travel at all. I mean, it's a long haul for us every time we go away. So long haul flights I'm not a fan of. I miss the competitive part, the match analysis and the competition and gearing up for all that. But I've enjoyed, working with some of the young ones, and I did some work here with Taylor Preston, and she got a wild card into the main draw first time. So I was just preparing her for what was coming and what to expect, and then also doing the same with her coach in just helping him understand the whole process here, because it was just very raw and very new for them.
Yes.
So that was nice to be able to do that. But yeah, I certainly missed, having someone when preparing and getting ready, and then the actual tactics and the matches. I miss doing that. Yeah.
So you might be up for taking on a new challenge?
Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, it would have to be something that really attracted me, and a player that attracted me, and I felt that there was a massive opportunity and upside to them, and how I feel I could help them.
Yeah.
In that way. But yeah, look, I'd certainly be interested. I've probably been away from it long enough. Whether it's with a younger player, I might do that, or whether it's with someone on the tour at the moment. But I might get back to the grind and find, wow, I made a big mistake.
I think your inbox is going to be absolutely full after this. Looking at the modern game of tennis and all the data analysis and everything that goes with it, how are you feeling about the whole coaching trial and the use of data to help players in the future, or do you just do it with your eye mostly?
No, I used to use all the data analytics as much as I could. During matches, I often didn't refer to it too much, because I felt like if I couldn't tell, Ash was serving at 50%, then there's something wrong. Or where she was winning points and losing points. I always felt like I could see that side of it. But yeah, we used a lot of different things, particularly in in training. We would use the GPS tracking, so we'd know what loads she was doing, whether it was stroke numbers or particular bursts or time on court. So we use that quite a lot. So I think there's certainly a place for it. The thing that I find hard with coaching now is that players are getting a bit reliant on heading to the coach all the time, where Ash and I worked on the opposite, where initially when we first started together, she would want some feedback from the box, or look at the box for recognition, and in the end, I mean, her last AO, she didn't look at the box once through the final.
I find that very refreshing compared to what we're seeing these days.
Yeah, and I feel, I found even when I was there, I found a lot of the coaches made their players reliant on them, which I always feel like it should be the opposite. I mean, I felt if I was doing my job, I'd make myself redundant. But everything I knew Ash would know, and that I'd eventually be out of a job because I couldn't help her anymore.
I don't think that was ever going to happen.
Yeah, but I just find that there's a lot of overcoaching, and there's a lot of coaches making their players reliant on them totally. So,
do you think that's because of the weird dynamic of being the player being the boss and the coach essentially being the employee, and a lot of people are worried about holding on to that particular job?
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. Yeah, I feel like that's a big part of it, and having the coaching the way it's set up now, where they can talk during the matches, is probably making that more of an issue as well, because they feel more reliant on the coach to provide that information all the time. Well,
when a coach is telling the player where to hit the serve on almost every serve, that's a big problem.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
it's not going to help the player in the long run, is it?
No, it actually won't. So, I mean, I remember during when Ash was playing the Wimbledon final against Findalina, and we'd sort of worked out her serving patterns and knew where she was going, and when to her credit, Carolina changed her spots and started varying where she was going. Ash sort of threw her arms up and looked, and she goes, I don't know which side to go, and I just yelled back and I said, just choose one. And she just laughed, and it actually just made her relax. And rather than telling her what to actually do, I mean, I couldn't answer it. I mean, she's out there seeing it and couldn't tell where it was going.
Yes.
So all credit to Carolina for recognising that Ash was sitting on her normal serves and changed it up. But sometimes the players have just got to think for themselves.
And I think all credit to you for saying, I don't know the answers sometimes, because a lot of coaches want to have the answer, whether it be wrong or right, that they're actually maybe telling a little bit of a lie there.
Yeah, I think that's right. And often they'll, if something's wrong with their serve or something, they'll tend to say something. It doesn't necessarily mean that's going to change. And every day there'll be something you could pick out to tell them that what they need to do.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. Or, I mean, with Ash, we made it more about the opposition than about herself. So if she started concentrating on herself and what was going wrong, she's actually forgotten that she's in a match and she's got to compete. So we made it more about who she's playing and what she needs to do against that person.
It's been well documented that she worked with the psychologist Ben Crowe to help. What would you say to Ash? So on a big point, I've commentated, I think, on 400 matches last year and 300 the year before, and you could almost see somebody's eyes when they've got that fear, and that they are not going to be able to serve it out. A good example is Deanne Parry against Mira Andreeva at the Australian Open first week, when Parry was up 5-1, and I actually said on radio live, Andreeva's going to win this match at 1-5 down, because it was so obvious. How did you work with Ash on getting through those horrible moments?
Yeah, a lot of our time was spent on talking about what you can affect in a match and what you can't affect. So, thinking about what's happened or the past is just, you've wasted a lot of time. So it was trying to get Ash to stay in the moment, and the only thing she could affect was the next point. And you can only ever get to at the end of a tennis match by winning enough points. So we had a few words that she would recognise that would just help her, and it was clear and calm.
Okay.
And that was just for her to clear her head and then just be calm, so that all I've got to do is play this next point as best as I possibly can.
Very good.
And that was for her the trigger to just try and let go. If she played a bad point, or if you felt, well, this girl's getting on top of me, was okay, but you can still affect the next point somehow.
Yeah.
And it was also on the days when, when she wasn't playing her best tennis, it was letting her know there's still things you can do. You can still run more, you can still chase that ball, you can still do a lot, even though you're not hitting the ball well. There are things you can do and things you can get yourself back into the match. But for her, it was those two words that kept her really what we talk about in the moment.
Fascinating. A final subject. We have a lot of parents of potential juniors that are listening to this. How would you, and what would you advise to the parents if they've got a talented player who loves it themselves? Can you give us some idea of a route that would be good for them to take?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any one pathway. I think that's the beauty of tennis and what we've seen is that you can put all these structures in place, you can put all these pathways in place, but often players find their own way. So I would think with parents, this is what I find is really difficult, is how do you choose which is the best pathway for...
Right.
And I think that's where it comes back to trust and who you know and what you've seen and understand. And I guess the information does help in that regard. But yeah, like I said before, if I was a parent of a good tennis player, I mean, I don't want my kids to
go anywhere near it.
No, ever do anything like that. I find it really difficult to make those choices because there is so much out there and so much information. I can't really say one clear or concise, but the thing that stands out to me is, as a player and coming through, the two things that you can just focus on is effort and attitude. And if you can just go into anything and just feel like if your child or your player is just doing that all the time, then you can never criticise them or worry about they're not doing the right things.
Something I've noticed, I think, is actually avoiding mistakes, which is very difficult. But the two things are finding a good coach or a good team, and the other thing is avoiding injuries. And obviously you've got to put in a lot of work. But if you don't find the right team, I think it can set you back a few years, because if you're taught incorrect technique or someone is talking rubbish and they're trying to convince you of all this, and then obviously if you don't do the fitness work early on, that's going to come back later to haunt you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the demands that are put on players even from a younger age, you know, the number of hours they do on court, you know, there's, you know, players here in the juniors that are, you know, super talented at 14.
Yes.
And they've done an enormous amount of work to get to that point. They're almost full-time at that age. So, yeah, they've got to take care of what they're doing with their body, because they're also going through, you know, growth and development in those areas. So, yeah, it's massively important to understand all those aspects of it. I mean, hitting a tennis ball is one aspect, but, yeah, recovery, rest, sleep, injury prevention, you know, even when you're having time off, is doing things that still mechanically will aid you when you walk back on the court again and start hitting balls. That's a big part of everything you do these days. So, yeah, it's not an easy time for kids, because it has transitioned so quickly into almost a full professional sport at an early age.
Yeah.
That, you know, I think the demands on them are difficult. I still think it's great that WTA have limited the number of tournaments for the girls, because it could put them in a situation where they could be injured for a long period of time.
Yeah, it can blow up, and as it has in the past.
Yeah, that's right.
What kind of characteristics, if you could name three of a good coach that parents could look towards to look after their child, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think for me the most important thing is understanding the athlete. I think that's probably the number one, and that is also knowing the parents, the environment, where they've come from, because it's no good just grabbing hold of that child and telling them this is what you need to do, this is where you need to get to, this is how you're going to do it, without understanding them.
Yep.
And I think that's a massive part of how you coach somebody, is knowing the needs of them. You've obviously got to know, for me, the different levels that you need to get to. So, you know, if you're in the juniors here, what's the next step? What do you need to be doing to be able to get to that next step, and then how do you progress? So I think that's important, both physically, tactically, technically, and then obviously with regard to, you know, mindset is a really big part of it in how you're approaching. I actually watched one of your English players, Hannah Klugman, yesterday.
I know very well indeed.
And that's technically probably the best service action I've seen on a girl in a long time. But then her ability in points is almost, she tries to play the perfect shot every time.
Okay.
Instead of being just a match player, so you sort of go, okay, technically she's doing everything wrong, but she's not learning this part of the game, which is how to compete against that opponent. So her opponent yesterday, little left-hander, technically nowhere near as good, but just went, okay, I'm going to out-compete her.
And won against Hannah in straight sets.
Yeah, and yet I felt Hannah's the better player. But in a match situation, and that's obviously will get better over time, knowing her age and what she can do. But
yeah, she's going to be 15 in February, so she's still very young.
Yeah, but, you know, amazing athlete for her age, and you think in 5 or 6 years' time, she's out here definitely playing
Yeah, I've actually had something to do with Hannah because I run the under-18 captain and coach in Surrey, and she's on that team. And I've actually known her for about 3 years. I know her coach, Ben Harron, because we grew up sort of playing tennis together. He's done a fabulous job with her.
Oh, yeah, wow.
And you're right. And what struck me, I think, when I first met her at 11, is how much she likes to compete. And that's quite unusual for a girl.
Yeah. And it's hard to say what she's doing is not the right thing, because she's obviously thinking, okay, I've got to play this shot at this time, and sometimes it's just overplaying it. And so at 14 you go, okay, well, that's something she's got to learn. But at 14 she's got plenty of time.
Correct.
So she's got time to
And she's gone through a regular schooling period. I think she's just left school to do correspondence, but up until this point she's been going to a normal private school. Her parents are delightful and not too pushy, so she's had quite a well-rounded education, which is a difference, isn't it?
Well, yeah, definitely, because then all of a sudden she increases her loads, the amount of time on court, and she's going to improve at a much faster rate.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing where she is that's impressive.
It's good knowledge. I'm sure Ben would absolutely love to speak to you.
Yeah, no, they're happy
gold
anytime.
dust.
Yeah, no, anytime. So yeah, I actually just because Mark Taylor, he sent me a message and said, if you get a chance, have a look at this girl. So that's why I went out and had a look.
She's still in the doubles, playing with me.
I was impressed. I was really
good player.
impressed.
And she just won under-18 Orange Bowl.
Yes,
and last year won a 100,000K. I think she was the youngest since Coco Gauff to do that.
Incredible.
So the results are coming, but you're right. There's quite a lot of growth to be done.
Yeah, but boy, if that's the one thing,
she's going to be all right.
Yeah, that's not too bad. Yeah.
Craig, it's been fascinating talking to you, and I very much hope we're going to see you on the WTA Tour very soon. I think the tour is very much missing you.
Thank you. Much appreciated, Candy.
Okay, so that was Craig Tyzzer, and we'll have part 2. Actually, an interview I did earlier this year, 2024, in our next pod. So it'll be nice to hear what he's getting up to now. Of course, Ash Barty has a little one and has sort of taken a back seat from the coaching route. But such an interesting and nice chap, Craig Tyzzer. And in my opinion, anyway, Mark, I don't know about you, one of the best coaches ever. It had me thinking about Craig Tyzzer, and especially about Darren Cahill with Yannick Sinner, who the best coaches are on the professional tours. I thought I'd love to ask you this. Both ATP and WTA, and obviously it's highly subjective between these. Have you had any chance to think about this?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't love the questions, because I think it starts off a fallacious line of thinking, because what do you mean when you say who's the best coach? Because it's for what and for whom. So, I'll actually give a little promotion here, self-promotion to First Strike Tennis. And what we're trying to do with the company and the website is help players of all levels find coaches, fitness trainers, all the industry experts that they need. The person that I would hire for a 14-year-old boy that wants to play college tennis is not going to be the same person I give a phone call that's a beginner 5-year-old girl, or a experienced WTA tour player that's needing somebody that, if they're 25 years old playing the tour. So first of all, I think it's a tough question, because it's always that debate between Ronaldo and Messi and, these Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, these kinds of questions. They can't be answered in that way. I think that your better way to do this would be to define the parameters of a good coach, what you should be looking for when you have a good coach. Because, for example, for me, if I have, I think, okay, let's go a little bit more out of the box with doubles. Okay, so if you ask me for a great doubles coach, I would think about people like Louis Caillet. I think he's done a great job. Rob Morgan, who's worked with Neil Skupski, I believe, and Wesley Koolhoff, and he's done a fantastic job with them. Craig Veal, that we've had on our webinar before. So those guys have done excellent jobs. Now, that doesn't mean that they're only able to work with doubles players, but it means that's where their reputation has been built right now in that niche. Now, if you're looking at tour coach, you can even then go all the way up to influencers, I would say, coaches like Moratoglu, Bollettieri. Those guys have done an unbelievable job at raising the profile of tennis, whether you like them or you dislike them. It seems to be always a lot of coaches I find judge how well somebody can coach based on their technical knowledge. For some reason, technique seems to be this sort of
the holy grail.
Yeah, it seems to be this erroneous measurement of a coach's ability is how well they can teach technique, which is just one component of the game. So,
and if you think about it, how many ATP WTA coaches actually need to coach a huge amount of technique? Because that should be done, as we know, for a child 6 until 14, the technique should be pretty much baked in, shouldn't it, by 14?
Absolutely. And I think technique is something that's really, we've had I'll give you another example of, I think that on the WTA tour, we've had discussions about this before with Samsonova's coach, Danilo. He's done an excellent job with her. And I know he came from past interviews we've had with him, or I've read excerpts from him, that he was a video coach originally that started coaching, and she thinks he's the best on the tour. I think he's a great coach. I think you can look at people like Raymond Sluiter, I never say his name right, that's now working, Slaughter, that's working with Elena Svitolina. He did a great job with Kiki Bertens before as well, and he was a great player. But really what I like about him is he's just a very humble, very nice person. So you enjoy talking with tennis with him. You can always feel like you're learning something. Thomas Johansson, excellent player, even more than excellent. He was a fantastic player. And did a great job working with David Goffin, did a good job with Sorana Castella this year, making her, last year, I should say, to the quarters of the US Open, I think.
This Australian Open.
I think it was the US Open. Yeah, he worked with her to Australia, but he did a great job with her the last year. Scott Davidoff does a great job also in the doubles. I think there's a coach I've always thought highly of, Olivier Genon, who works right now. He's not on the tour, but he did a great job years ago working with Arina Kromacheva, developing
Clara Towson.
Clara Towson. He did a great job. I'm skipping somebody, Yastremska. He did a great job. So, of course, I think Iain is on that list as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought him into the picture. But I think the best way that I always think of the best coach is somebody that if I was running a business like I am doing right now, it's somebody that I could call and put them in any situation or scenario and know they do a good job. So I could send them with Magda and know they're going to do a good job at the WTA Tour at the highest level. I could also ask them to fill in some country club lessons with women's clinics, men's double stuff, whatever. They'd be
versatile, totally versatile.
For me, the best coaches are those kinds of coaches that I could put in any situation and know they're going to do a good job.
Yeah, because some coaches, I think you could only see teaching at the very top level. And I know since I coach lower down that I can see a lot of coaches that could never, ever coach an ATP or WTA player. So there's some with limitations and some, depending on what level it is, it doesn't have to be right at the bottom or right at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. A couple of months ago in Dubai, I had a gym session and Brad Gilbert was in there and we started conversing about different things. And he was very honest. He said, I've been fortunate because I think I'm a reasonable coach, but I've been lucky enough to work with great players. And there's other coaches out there that are just as good or better than me that aren't given that same opportunity. So the coach is often, or the player often makes the coach. And
absolutely,
if you're working with a player that's 1,000 in the world and you take them to 300, that's a fantastic job. That can be a much better job, again, you'd have to define that, than a coach that takes someone from 80 in the world to 50. But it's not as sexy. People don't look at the players that came from 1,000 to 300, right? We're looking, generally speaking, at those top players.
Absolutely.
Which is it is a mistake. One of the questions I often get asked now when I'm trying to help players find coaches is, or parents even, is, well, what should I be looking for? What is a good coach? How can I find the right person? Because the problem in tennis we have is, unlike a CPA or an accountant where you've got a bachelor's degree in accounting, you've got your CPA license and qualifications. Tennis isn't like that. The most credentialed people in the world are not the best coaches in our field, unfortunately. So it makes it very difficult. But I think that if you're looking for a coach, you've got to find somebody that's experienced. But again, that doesn't mean that you look at somebody like Tom Hill that did a great job with Maria Sakkari. He wouldn't have been the most experienced guy out there. So experience is important, but it's not the most important. I think. And
how much is having fun and being kind and being a nice person important? Very.
And I think that one of the biggest parts of coaching that you can't teach is the ability to feel situations, is that almost that sociology that if you were studying in school, how well you can connect with another person, feel the situation, know when is it time to make a joke, when is it time to back off, when to press. That's coaching, and that's really hard to teach, because now people are messaging me and asking me, what do I need to do to be a better coach? They've got all these credentials, they can teach a forehand better than I ever could, but it's all about personality. It's about whether you connect. And we've said it before, players typically don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you've got to get them to buy into your philosophy. But I would definitely, if I was encouraging people to find coaches, look at their past, speak to ex-players if you can, or get references, check out the qualifications, but I don't think they hold too much weight. I think the best thing for me, though, is always do a trial with a coach. Get on court and see what you feel with them.
All right, so enough time wasting, Mark. Your top 5 coaches.
So I would put Louis Caillet in there, just because I think he's been a great coach. From learning the physics of tennis, I think he's really good. You watch a lot of his videos, he's very informative, educational. So I definitely have him in there. I'd put Olivier Genome in there for sure. I think he's a really, he's a coach that's shown that he can take a junior all the way up to the pros and do a great job with established players already. There's 2 for you. Really putting me on the spot. I think I would have to put Iain in there as well.
You're not allowed to put Iain in there.
Not allowed to put Iain in there.
No,
Okay,
that's an agreement we had. No, you or Iain can be in our list.
I don't. Okay. Alan Ma is a person that was a sort of a mentor to me over the years. I've worked for him, and he's a great coach. He's got a lot of experience on and off the court. He knows how to make tennis as a business, but also to be effective on the court. And I think his work ethic and in that regard has been huge. And then I would have I have a coach in Florida that very few people would have heard of, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying that, but he's a fantastic coach, Luis Nascimento from Portugal. He's worked with some of the top Portuguese players from Portugal, obviously, but he's based in Florida and does a great job, and he's someone I use a lot to help me mentoring and things of this nature. I think I'm up to 4.
Yep, 4.
You know what, I'm gonna put Thomas Johansson in there, just because I've enjoyed talking with him. I've got to know him a lot more this past year or 2, and I think he's, I haven't told him this, so I hope he doesn't hear this, but I had a poster of him up in my bedroom when I was a kid, because he won Australian Open in 2000, something around that.
Yeah, 2003, I think it was.
I think it was something around that, and I love the way he played. It was a really cool, really great player. So I'd have those 5, but that I put a controversial, I put an asterisk next to Nick Bollettieri, because I think without him, probably none of us have jobs. I think Vic Braden, sort of the same thing. And also I'd even maybe put in Patrick Mouratoglou in there as well, just because I think he's raised the profile of the game.
More than 5, Mark, so I'm not sure you get a point for those ones. But
point deduction. Point deduction.
This is from your co-coach, Ian Hughes. He says Darren Cahill, Carlos Rodriguez, Olivier Genome, Raymond Sluiter, Bertens, now Svitolina, as you said, Javier Marti, Badosa, now Christian. Now I was talking about Jacqueline Christian before we ran the Craig Tyzzer interview. I think she's playing unbelievably well. Had a 4-match winning streak before that loss to Danielle Collins. He said, I've gone to the understated no ego, the humble coaches. And he said, as a self-promoting coach doing an amazing job, then it's definitely Patrick Mouratoglou. And I think Nick Bollettieri would probably be in that category as well, the late great. I would go for Darren Cahill. I think sorry, Candy, to interrupt. So my name wasn't on his list? Well, only because I absolutely put in that he couldn't have himself or you.
Otherwise
it would have been number 1.
About to cancel.
Number uno. I kind of made my decisions on people that have coached at least 2 players to the top of the game, because it's so difficult to quantify what is a great coach, like you said. So Darren Cahill, Simona Halep, Yannick Sinner. I've actually gone for David Witt, because I think he's done a brilliant job with Maria Sakkari already, and has coached Jessica Pegula to world number 3. Lars Christensen, former coach of Towson and Runa, and now coaching Towson again. I think he's very, very understated. Vic Braden, you mentioned a little bit before my time, but his teachings are amazing. I'm going to put Craig Tyzzer in there just because I love the way Ash Barty played, and I just think he's a lovely chap. And honourable mention goes to Brad Gilbert, just because he's led Coco to a major title. He's coached Andy Roddick and many other good players as well. And of course, some of the coaches I've mentioned are sort of the headliners, aren't they? They're very much in the news, so probably easy to pick. But it'd be interesting to hear what our listeners think about the best coaches.
I feel I'm ashamed now. I feel like redoing my list because I've missed off Darren and I've missed off Brad, and they have to be on that list as well.
You can't get everybody. I mean, I would say Carlos Rodriguez is one of the best ever former coaches current works in the academy, doesn't he? Of Justine Enna and Zhang Qinwen. Alan Ma, I think, is a brilliant coach. There's so many, but we said five.
I think that with Darren, he's the epitome of what I sort of said as a guy that could be placed in any situation. You know, you could trust him with a beginner that's never touched a racket, or you could put him with a transition player or a top player. He's definitely in there, and Brad has done a great job with everyone he's worked with. I did ask Magda before what her five were, and she wasn't very happy because I didn't give her any time. I asked her for about 2 minutes before we started this, and she's only messaged me while we've been doing this, but she said you and Iain. Well, I didn't tell her we weren't allowed into it, but she knows that she's got fitness tomorrow, so that probably influenced that decision a little bit. She said, interestingly enough, and this is not my influence, but Olivier as well. She put him in there. Raymond Schleuter as well. And then she, interestingly enough, she says, I don't know a lot about any of these coaches' philosophies, but I think that David Witt has done an excellent job with all the players he's worked with. So she agreed with you. Yeah,
no, I think he's quite a good one. It'll be interesting to see how much better Maria Sakkari goes, but you could just see her sort of shoulders back. She looks less panicked when she's playing. I just think he's a very relaxed, nice, good coach, and he's obviously doing the business with two of the greatest players in the last decade or so. All right, Mark, we better call it there. Thank you very much. Good luck in Rome. We'll catch up with you next time. We'll also bring you part 2 of Craig Tyzzer, and I've also got an interview with Louis Cayer to run as well in the future.
Thanks, Candy. Thanks, everyone, for listening.